Now, ladies and gentlemen, once and for all, are you ready? Once and for all,
the former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world.
In this group, we got 5 whistles. They range anywhere from $10 to about 20, including shipping. You can get them for pretty cheap, which is, really a nice thing about all this. And I'm going to kind of break down each one. I'm going to try to keep everything as consistent as possible. I'm going to do the same, I'm going to play the same tune, I'm going to check tuning the same way, we're going to try to do our best to compare volume the same way. And you guys let me know what you think. I'm going to give you my opinion. I want to know what you all think for each of these categories. You let me know what you think sounds the best, looks the best, plays the best. That's the whole point of all this. First one that we're going to talk about is the Feadog Pro. No particular reason other than it's the first one that I grabbed off the pile. So I'm going to start with just a basic D scale, and I'm going to check tuning too. That is shrill. Overall, it sounds pretty good. Most of those notes were lining up pretty well, and the ones that weren't, I could kind of blow in tune with a little bit more or less air. So that's a good sign. One thing that I did notice just from running that scale is that some of those notes felt a little gritty, particularly in the low octave, which to me is a little surprising. Usually it's the higher octave where things kind of break down a little bit, but on the A and the B, it's got a bit of that buzz. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Some folks actually really like that sound because it is a very traditional kind of sound. So now I'm going to play a tune, and I'm going to play the same tune on all of these just to keep things as consistent as possible again. And the one we're going to use is the Cliffs of Moher. And I like that one because it starts up high, which again is usually where the rubber meets the road on these, and it goes all the way down to the low E. So we have a decent range, and I'm just going to run one A part. I'm going to play the same thing on all these whistles. So again, it's those A and B notes in the lower octave which get a little gritty. Surprisingly, the upper octaves don't, which again is just a matter of preference, just something you might want to keep an eye on as you're playing these things. It's very well balanced, and I don't know if that's specific to the Pro versus the regular, but I kind of like where that sits. You can see this is my very unscientific balance test, right about that B finger, which is what I'm used to. Again, that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It just seems to fit well in my hands, and that's what I kind of come to expect and what I want to feel out of a whistle to make me feel like I've got a good grip on it and I got a good balance and I don't have to worry about it moving around too much. All in all, it's very basic, which I think can be a very good thing, especially for what you get for the price. It's not bad at all. Next up, we have the industry standard Generation. Blue mouthpiece, aluminum bore. They also make these in brass. I've never really been able to tell much of a difference in the tonal quality. This is kind of the gold standard. This is the one that most people think of when they think of a tin whistle. Here again, basic D scale, checking tuning. High Ds. First impressions, I would say that it's a little bit different than the Feadog in that where the Feadog had some grittiness in the A and the B. Here I could hear it on the second octave E. Especially that E. It's got kind of a staticky sound to it. Tune for comparison, Cliffs of Moher. And here we go again with the balance test. See, this one is a little bit higher. A little bit above that B finger. Not a noticeable difference to me when I'm playing it. This is kind of what most people would say they're used to when it comes to tin whistles. Now, those notes that are a little weak, get that kind of raspy sound. C natural. Now, adjusting your fingering might help in that case, I just noticed. Putting those fingers down, this kind of weird forked position does clean it up a bit. A lot of this is some experimentation, might make some differences to you. Because, whoo, that's rough. So that's one of those tricks with the mass-produced whistles. Sometimes you get a few that are a little wonky like that. Next up, we have Woodi. Very similar to the Szatos. I did a review on this maybe about a year or so ago, and I would say I enjoy it more than a Szato, but it's patterned after that, as far as I can tell. The design of the thing seems very similar, and it's got this kind of interesting little matte finish, whereas the Szatos are always glossy and felt kind of, slippery, easy to drop. Let's do a D scale to compare and check tuning. Okay, well, clearly the high end is a little weak, which is not the end of the world in that C sharp and high D, because you're really not going to be playing those too much. The other thing I did notice here is the intonation is a little off. You can kind of blow those in tune, but you definitely have to spend some time getting used to that. Plus side, the tone was pretty solid, I thought. Very clear, if you like that, and in this case I kind of do. It does not sound plastic to me. That's maybe just my ear, but a lot of these, especially the plastic whistles, and particularly the Szatos and that style, tend to sound a lot like recorders. This one doesn't. It sounds like a traditional whistle, just very clean. So we'll blast away with the cliff some more. Now those high notes I could definitely feel were giving out. You have to really focus on those. Not a bad thing, just means it might require a bit more practice. Other than that, the notes were very clean, I thought. The old balance check on here, there's the B finger there. This one, pretty close, yeah. A little higher than the B, but again, I would say comparable to the other whistles, certainly comparable to the generation. It's thicker, which, again, it's just a matter of getting used to it. I like how they do the mouthpiece. It's very comfortable, sits on your mouth pretty well. And I'm just curious to compare the overall length. Yeah, that's what I thought. It felt a little shorter, top to bottom, than the generation where the mouthpiece goes. Was curious if I was right about it, so just wanted to see how it differed. But all in all, I think it's pretty good. The top end is a bit worrying, at least the top two notes. The high C sharp and the high D, definitely not worrying at all because you rarely use those. But the high A and the high B, it'd probably take a lot of getting used to really start to lock those down. But maybe that's a price that's worth paying because the tone is so good. Next up, we got the Sweetone, Clarke Sweetone. Made no secret about it in the review that I did on this one a while ago, but this is one of the first whistles that I really like playing. I've always kind of liked the tone. Play a D scale so we can get an idea of what we're looking at here. Well, intonation issues definitely jumped out. I have no idea why this thing is reporting an E as a B and an F sharp as a C sharp. It did that when I was testing it before. I have a feeling that's got more to do with the app, but I'm curious more about where we are in the needle. How far off from center are we? And there's a couple of those. Now, one thing that I never did mention before is that you can actually tape these holes. If a note is sharp, you can flatten it, specific notes that way. We'll run cliff some more here for a comparison. I like the tone of this one. I think It's more uniform across the board, which to me is a nice thing. You don't have to spend as much time thinking about each individual note and do I need to correct that as I'm playing it, because that's just one more thing you got to think about. I like the C natural, very strong, especially for a affordable whistle. Each note seems pretty clear. I think that's a good thing, and again, I made no secret about the fact that I liked the tone of this whistle when I first got it. Balance-wise, pretty much right on the money there on the B finger, which I do like. Some folks may or may not like the conical bore as opposed to a cylindrical bore, which, you know, this one is conical, so that is something that's different. So your lower hand and your top hand is just going to feel a little bit different. One complaint that I do have about it is this seam down the back. I never really cared for that. And I can feel it as I'm playing it. Not the end of the world, but, you know, hey, you could even maybe throw a piece of masking tape on the back if you decided you didn't want to deal with it. The last one in this group is the original Clarke. This dates back to 1848, 43, 48, something like that. It dates back a minute. Not this one, of course. This I bought off of Amazon a little while ago. But this is one of the original tin whistles along with the Generation. Kind of, again, part of that gold standard. So let's check our tuning on this one, because this one, key point, not tunable. Ooh, dizzy. Yeah, one thing to keep in mind, because it's not tunable, you are going to have to fight those notes in tune, which is just a matter of getting used to it. It's very, very breathy, to the point that I'm seeing stars here. I can't quite tell where I'm at. Lost a lot of air on that deal. Real world tests, play clip some more. Well, as I mentioned in the review on this one, I can just feel air escaping. I can feel it hitting my hand as I'm playing, which just fills me with dread because I know that's just wasted air. That said, that really soft, mellow tone is something that a lot of people probably kind of like. And if you dig it, you know, more power to you. That's cool. To me, it felt very, very inefficient. Maybe that's just me. Who knows? Now, this one has a wooden plug in the mouthpiece, which is a little different. That's probably, yeah, I'm gonna say that's gonna set the balance up just a bit. Still pretty close to where I like it. Again, conical bore on this one, just like the Sweetone, so that's something to keep in mind. And it's still got that seam because it is just a piece of rolled metal. This one is actually a little bit softer than the Sweetone. I don't know if that's better or worse, but I don't notice it as much on this one. So what do y'all think of this series, of this kind of lower end, more affordable version of the tin whistle? Which one's your favorite? What do you guys think? If I had to make a pick, I'd go with the Sweetone. That's probably not going to come as a huge surprise to anybody because I did mention that in the previous video. There's a few things that I would improve upon. One is that goofy seam in the back, because that does kind of drive me crazy. But overall, it felt the most consistent, and I just kind of like the tone of it the best. For 10 bucks, 12 bucks, somewhere in that range, it might be worth picking up if you're used to playing something else. Just see how you compare, see what you think. Some folks won't like the conical shape. This is really the only conical bore instrument that I played for any length of time. But I don't really mind it. I think it works pretty well. In this category, we got two whistles. We got a Jerry Freeman Tweaked Generation, and we got a Tony Dixon. This is the DX004. I'd never heard of Tony Dixon. I've never played one of these before, and so I was glad I got a chance to blast away on it. I did a review on it maybe a month or so ago. The Freeman, these I've played quite a few of. He makes all different versions of these. This is the Generation one. He makes some for the Feadogs. He does all kinds of stuff. They range anywhere from 30 to 50 bucks, depending on where you get them. I don't know if Jerry is not making as many of these as he used to, but these are kind of tough to come by. You might be looking at an eBay kind of situation now. But we're going to start with the Dixon, and as always, we're going to start with the D scale. Well, the second octave is a bit sharper. Otherwise, the notes seem pretty solid. Now, the one thing I did notice is the D. That high D's got a bit of that grit to it. Not that that's a bad thing. Again, just something to be aware, and it's a little bit different than the other notes. Overall, I think the tone was pretty solid. Some of those top two notes, the high A and the high B, would probably take some getting used to be able to really lock them down. Let's just do the old unofficial balance test here. It's pretty much right on the money, I would say. Yeah, look at that, right on the top B. I was thinking with this little bulbous bit here that it might kind of adjust the balance, but no, it seems very, very stable. But overall, I think it's pretty nice. The holes do feel a little bit more cramped than I would be used to on this one. That could be just because I have fairly large fingers, and maybe that's part of it. Not a deal breaker. All right, last up, we got the Jerry Freeman Tweaked. This is the generation, I think he calls this a Bluebird, if I'm not mistaken, just because the blue mouthpiece. Let's run our basic scale here. Well, with the exception of those last two notes, the rest of them were within range of being in tune across the board, so that's a good sign. We'll play our tune again. Wow, really, to me, just seems fairly flawless, I would say. It's got that old school sound, but it's reliable, and it didn't fill me with dread hitting those high notes thinking I'm going to crack them because I don't know what I'm doing. A solid instrument, top to bottom, if you like that old school sound. So decision time. Between these two, I would go with the Generation, but I don't think you're going to go wrong with the Dixon. I would kind of be curious to see what other options that Tony makes. A lot of folks mentioned DX005, maybe? I'm not sure. There's one, it's a simpler looking two-piece model. It doesn't have this bulb bit here, so I'm kind of curious how that one sounds. Overall, I was very impressed with this, particularly for one that I'd never tried before, never seen in person. I think if you can find a Freeman, he just spends so much time on these. They come right out of the box with really good intonation, and they're just reliable right out of the box, which is kind of nice and might just save you a little bit of a hassle. And since they're about the same price, that's what I would recommend. All right, y'all ready for the big dogs? We're going to compare the top two.
Undisputed heavyweight champion of the world.
All right, here are our heavyweights. We got the Gary Humphrey, which I've been playing, this one in particular I've been playing about 15 years. And this Killarney whistle, which I just got recently, had never played before, but who you guys absolutely raved about. If you want a more in-depth review on that, I have another video on that. You're more than welcome to check that out. But let's break them down. Starting with the Killarney whistle, let's blast away here with the D scale. Right on the money, as far as I can tell anyway. One thing I do notice is it's very efficient with the air. I made it through a lot further through that scale than I had on any of the other whistles, which is a nice touch and something I definitely appreciate. So we'll play our jig now. Wow, it's, again, flawless, I would say. Very solid. Which is what you'd expect. This thing runs about 75 to 100 bucks, depending on the exchange rate, because they're coming out of Ireland. The other thing I like about it is that it feels, or sounds, I should say, that the lower octave and the higher octave are much more in line as far as the total volume for each note, which I think is kind of cool. It's a bit unusual in the whistle. Typically, you could play a low D and a higher D, and it's radically different in volume, whereas this isn't. Very close. Now, balance check. Here's the one thing that I'm going to have an issue with. You see how much more top heavy this thing is. You got about 3 or 4 inches higher, 3 inches higher, I guess, off of the B hole than the other whistles are. Not a deal breaker. That kind of put me off of these whistles when I first saw them. John Sint makes a very similar design, Very, very similar. But I imagine it's one of those things that you would simply get used to. Now it's time to bust out the old standby, the reigning heavyweight champion here. This is my Gary Humphrey from 15 years ago. Basic D scale. Wow, those high Ds are killing me. I'm going to be hearing that in my sleep. So just like the Killarney, very reliable, very accurate. Now we'll play our clip some more here. Very similar, as far as I can tell, to the Killarney, which says a lot for the Killarney because this is my all-time favorite. Balance check is just north of the B hole, about half an inch or so, which is, again, what I'm used to, what I've been playing for so long. So which do you like? You guys know what I like. I've been playing Humphreys for 15 years and I like them. If I was going to call this number one, which I would call this 1A. Very, very close. They're both extremely well built, and I think you can't go wrong with either one of these. So that's it. That's nine whistles. And all of these were, with the exception of the Humphrey, which obviously I was already playing, these were all suggestions that you guys made. These are the instruments that y'all are playing. Now, there were a couple stragglers here and there that unfortunately I didn't have a chance to get to, but I'm curious what you guys think. I've ranked all these 1 through 9 in the description below. Check it out, see if you agree, disagree. Let's keep it civil, of course, because a lot of it boils down to personal preference. But I'm curious what you guys think. What would you put as your number one? Why? Let me know. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks very much, y'all.